Hello everybody and welcome to this SUPboarder comparison review of two hard composite boards from the Astron range, the Europa and the Apollo touring stand-up paddleboards. We're very excited to bring you this comparison review. Will and myself have been out on the water testing these boards, flat water, a little bit of open water, a bit of wind conditions. So if you want to know if these boards are right for you, make sure you stick around until the end of this review. Welcome if you are tuning in for the very first time on this SUPboarder comparison review, and hello again if you have visited us before. Remember, like, subscribe to our YouTube channel, and that way you'll always stay updated with new content coming your way. So, Astron, they are a huge brand now in the stand-up paddleboard and water sports industry. They have a whole range of equipment from boards, paddles, surfboards, foils, wings, safety equipment, clothing. They are a really big brand that have come out of China. So let's get into this review, comparing both of these boards to see if they're going to be right for you. Starting off with the Astron Apollo here in front of us. This board is 12 feet 6 inches in length, 30 inches wide, and 6.5 inches thick. It comes in at 280 liters of volume. It weighs 17.2 kilograms on our scales, which is about 38 pounds, and it retails for 1,099 British pounds, euros, and dollars. So the construction of the Apollo board, it's an epoxy construction with an EPS foam core, so multiple layers of 4 and 6 ounce glass on the top and the bottom, offers a pretty solid SUP, and also does add that weight. The other board we have to compare today is the Astron Europa. Now this board is 12 feet 6 inches long, 28.5 inches wide, and 7.5 inches thick. It comes in at 270 liters of volume. It weighs 14.2 kilograms, which is 31 pounds, and retails for 1,199 British pounds, euros, and dollars. Looking at the construction of the Europa, this is a bamboo sandwich technology, so a mix of wood and glass construction. Gives it great strength and also that really nice bamboo finish on top. With purchase of both of these boards, you do get a branded coiled leash and also a 10-inch center fin. Let's get into the fittings that we have on both of these boards today. You notice at the front of both boards, you do have a bungee system for storage of gear. This is fantastic if you want to use these boards for that touring space, shoving some gear under there, going off on your day paddle, or even a little overnight adventure. Both boards also have an air vent for releasing pressure. The Europa, you will notice it has the vent at the top of the front of the board, and the Apollo has it next to the handle. Taking a look at the handles, they are both weighted extremely well. Taking a look at the deck pad, and they do differ between both of the boards. For the main pad, we do have a diamond groove EVA pad. That's the same for both boards, but as we move back, we'll notice that the Apollo has a separate rear tail pad with a high kicker. So when you are stepping back on the Apollo, you are able to wedge your foot up against that for a step back turn. With the Europa, we'll notice that there is no kicker on the tail of the board, but it does have a bungee system. So different to the Apollo again, the Europa has a rear bungee system for storage and carrying of gear. Behind that, we have the leashing point, and then flipping the board over, we just have that single center US center fin box with that 10-inch single fin. So looking at the design and shapes of both of these boards and starting off with some of the similarities that they have. Firstly, you'll notice the standing tray is found on both of these boards. Now, that means you are standing a little bit lower to the water. So instead of having that flat deck with 7.5 inches or 6.5 inches of thickness, you are standing about an inch or half an inch lower in the water, which gives you added stability. So you are having a lower center of gravity in the water. Now both boards have a nice wide tail at the back, and that's just for added stability. So when you are stepping back for a step back turn, or if you are storing gear on the Europa, you do have that stability. The rocker shapes vary slightly between the boards. We'll notice that the Apollo, just sitting in the water, it has quite a little bit of lift in the nose. The nose shapes differ slightly as well. Just with that width, we have a little bit more bulk and a little bit more area on the Apollo. The Europa is obviously a little bit of a narrower board, and you'll notice that the water really slices off well when you are paddling the Europa. Flipping the boards over, having a look at the bottom shapes, the bottom contours. Now, both of these boards have a rolled bottom from nose to tail, both the same, not as exaggerated as some other shapes that are out there. However, this gives you a nice blend of that feeling a little bit lively and a little bit rolly, but also it displaces water really well to give you a little bit of extra speed too, if when you do get the board up onto the planing speed. Getting both of these touring boards from Astron out on the water, giving you a little bit of insight into our thoughts and impressions. Will and I were riding both of these boards in a range of different conditions, and we were swapping them over, seeing how they felt. And to be honest, we were quite impressed with the overall feel and performance of these boards. So first off, in the flat water, these boards, they do track, they do have glide, they are quite nice to paddle. Did notice, especially on the Apollo, which is the 30-inch wide model, it is a little bit slower than the Europa, which is just a given because obviously it's a little bit wider. You're having more board to push through the water, but it also is a bit heavier too. And with a heavy board, you'll notice that it isn't as lively. It doesn't have that spark as a lighter board would. However, you'd be paying a lot more for a lighter board as well. Now, during that step back turn on the Apollo, we noticed that it was fairly easy because of that really wide tail at the back. It gives you great stability stepping back there. Yes, the tail did sink a little bit. However, it was nice and easy to turn around on the spot, especially on this board because it doesn't have the rear bungees. You are able to step back. It's got the kicker there as well, so you know where your foot is. What was really noticeable on the Apollo was the ability to steer with your feet or feet steering. So when you are leaning from one side and paddling on that side as well, you are able to turn the board off in a different direction. That's really handy if you are paddling in a little bit of wind or a little bit of current. You are able to counterbalance or counter turn toward the current or toward the wind, which does help when you are, especially with carrying a lot of gear, if you do have that wind use as well. So you can get to where you're going that little bit quicker and that little bit easier. This board really lends itself to moving around, getting used to how it feels, and taking it in a little bit of open water conditions too. So getting this board in those choppier conditions, the water did slap up onto the nose a little bit. It did come up onto the deck a little bit as well, but it handled itself fairly well. Jumping on the Europa, and as we'd expect compared to this 30-inch wide on the Apollo, you are getting a little bit of a less stable board in that 28.5 inches wide, but you are getting a slightly faster board as well. The Europa has a really pointed nose shape, so when you are standing a bit further forward on the board and you are engaging the nose, you can see that water really slices off the sides. That higher voluminous nose as well just means that if any water does get on top, it's just going to shed across off the side of the board and it's not going to end up on the standing area. You'll also notice at the tail of the board, we don't have too much wake or too much turbulence coming off the back of the board, which is always a great sign of a board that is giving you extra speed, extra glide. There's nothing underneath that is creating turbulence to slow the board down. Being that 28.5 inches wide just means that you are getting that little bit of more performance from the board in the way it paddles in speed, also in the way it turns. So when you do a step back turn, has a touch less volume, it's a little bit less width in the tail, so it is a little bit wobbly when you do step back there compared to the Apollo. Still nice and stable, but you will notice that it comes around a lot quicker just because of that less weight and the less width in the nose. And I want to touch on the bamboo as well, mixed with that glass construction. It does make for a lighter weight board and also probably a better looking board if you are leaning toward that kind of aesthetics. However, I will say that compared to the Apollo, the Apollo is 2 inches wider, but it's only 10 liters more. You're getting a significant weight drop in the Europa. Almost 3 kilograms actually between both boards. Even though they're the same length, they are almost the same volume, but just changing the construction and just changing the width a little bit can really dramatically change the weight of the board. And weight is really key for performance, speed, and just how lively the board feels on the water as well. Jumping into some of the negatives or the cons that we found on these boards. First off, the fin, when you do fit it in, it can be a little bit loose in the fin box. We noticed it more with the Europa when we slotted in the 10-inch single fin. Had a little bit of play from side to side, but you can always stick a little bit of tape in there or something just to firm it up. But it would be nice just to have a fin that fits in nicely. Now, staying with the fin, I think for a touring specific board, it would be really nice to get a larger area fin, a little bit of a wider fin, just so we can get a bit more tracking on these boards. The Europa I felt tracked really nicely, and I think that's just down to that narrower width with that 10-inch single fin, but the Apollo I felt like it was, you had to switch sides on the paddling a little bit more. It was kind of turning off here and there, and like I did mention, it does have that feet steering ability, so maybe that was what it was. I was maybe leaning on the rail a little bit and it was kind of turning off to the side. But still, if you got a bigger fin, a bit more area on the fin, there's some other brands out there that do a touring style fin. You've seen the kind of like a lot of area, almost like a rectangle. It probably would be nice just to have extra tracking with that fin. I will say that the Apollo is probably an extra little bit heavy, but that's 17.2 kilograms what we weighed. I know on the website it says about 15.5 kilograms. The Europa was 14.2 kilograms, which is very, very similar to a few other boards on the market. But it is something just to keep in mind. I probably wouldn't say it's a full-on con, but just do consider it if you are lifting this board up to store it or lifting it onto the roof of the car. Just making sure that you're getting it something that you are able to handle and maneuver around. Another con we're going to say with Astron is just their environmental credibility. Obviously, these boards are going to just come as they are like this, but they do have a lot of their other products wrapped in plastic. For example, the fin and the leash come in a plastic bag with purchase, but it would be nice to see Astron kind of moving away and moving into that environmental field, just because they do have so many products out there as well, and that equals a lot of plastic. Another con we'll mention is that when we do get water up on the deck of the board, we'll notice that it pulls on the standing area and it's really hard for it to drain away. That's just due to this standing tray. You'll notice that there's actually no runoff for the board. Because we have a little bit of that tail lift, we are keeping all of that water on the deck of the board. We're going to go into who these boards are going to suit. You've probably picked up on a few things during this video, but obviously the Apollo is definitely suited for the heavier rider just because of that extra width. Myself, I quite enjoyed riding the Apollo. It felt just a little bit more stable for me and a little bit of an easier paddling board. However, as a 85 kilogram rider, I think you could really push this board up to around probably 100 kilograms would be the maximum weight rider you'd put on this. You could, if you were 100 kilograms, you probably could store some gear as well to go on that day touring adventure, but I wouldn't want to push it too much over that 110, 120 kilogram mark, just because it isn't as thick as other boards out there as well. This one's only 6.5 inches thick, so you are going to be lowering that board in the water a bit more as you put more weight on it, obviously. And that way, it's going to actually slow the board down because there's more board in the water. Moving on to the Europa, obviously it's going to suit a bit of a lighter rider. So Will enjoyed riding the Europa, and he weighs in at about 65, 70 kilograms. So I'd say riders up to probably maximum 85, 90 kilograms on the Europa, depending on your level. If you're a little bit more advanced, you go a little bit heavier in your weight limit for the Europa. And if you're that beginner rider, you could be getting on this board at 50, 60 kilograms and still really be enjoying your paddling, because this board, 28.5 inches wide, if you are that lighter rider, it's still enough width for you to be able to balance and have the stability needed, but it's just that little bit lighter in weight as well, so it's going to be a little bit easier to carry. If you have been paddling an SUP currently and you are looking to move into a composite board for touring, then definitely take a look at these Astron boards for you. It's really nice to see Astron pushing into the market with their touring range of boards. These are definitely comparable to some other premium boards on the market, so do take into consideration Astron if there is a local dealership to you, or if you do like the look of these boards, because they do perform well out on the water. We were quite surprised on how well they went. Yes, there are a few cons and there are a few things that could be added to the board, but as a start, Astron are really nailing their designs. So thank you very much for tuning into this SUPboarder comparison review of the Astron Apollo and the Europa, which is in that bamboo construction. It's been great to have you here watching it. Thank you very much for your support and watching these videos. If you have any questions about these boards, please do drop them in the comments below. We'd happily answer any of your questions, or if you just want to give us some feedback, maybe you have some of these boards at home, please let us know how they're working out for you. Obviously, we just get them and test them for up to a month, so we're not having them over the long term. So let us know if they're lasting a long time and if they are still performing at their best. Thanks again. We look forward to seeing you in another SUPboarder comparison review.